Get to know Atari ST one-on-one beat-em-ups in 10 games, coming up next. Today we begin another series for the Atari ST and possibly other platforms. This series will choose 10 games from a specific genre from the machine's library and examine its evolution over the life of the platform. Today we'll look at one-on-one fighters, a genre commonly called beat-em-ups, not scrolling or platform beat-em-ups, but purely the one-on-one genre that started with simple boxing games on the Atari 2600 and other cartridge systems, and also the arcade game by Techno, Karate Champ. By far, the best 8-bit game of this type is International Karate by Archer Mclean. This was ported to many platforms, including the ST. Besides taking a look at the genre on the ST, a big question I want to answer here is whether or not this 8-bit ultimate classic was ever bettered in a significant way on the 16-bit Atari. Special note, I didn't want to read any instructions to play them, so I didn't study up on any controls other than those that happened to be mentioned in the reviews I read. Fair or not, a single button and a single stick should be pretty easy to figure out if a game has been designed well. On that note, I also decided not to use any cheats either, as I wanted to experience each of these as they were intended. The first game we're going to cover is The Karate Kid 2 from 1986 by Microdeal. The Karate Kid 2, the computer game, is a one-on-one fighting game based roughly on The Karate Kid Part 2. The storyline of the movie is not directly addressed, and the player only participates in 5 fights, sort of based on movie scenes. The difficulty rises from fight to fight. This is one of the early ST games to feature a full MIDI soundtrack, if you have the right equipment or emulation to enjoy it. It takes place over static screens that depict film locations and fights Daniel must win to proceed. There are also some mini-games in between that feature semi-memorable set pieces from the first 2 films. This first game seemingly takes its cues directly from International Karate. From the one-on-one battles to the mini in-between games, it's a virtual clone with movie branding. From personal experience though, I can attest to being blown away by this game when I first played it in 1987. It got generally good reviews and was ported to the Amiga 1000 a year later in a version that used the 1 megabyte disk drive of that system to deliver more sampled sounds and graphics than this earlier ST release. So what did the magazines have to say? The good. In German ASM Magazine's 87% review, they liked it and praised its graphics, animation, speed, and sound. The mid. They also said its difficulty might be a little high. In Happy Computer's 80% review, the one complaint they had was that the character sprites were a little small. The bad. There really wasn't much bad reported about the ST version at least. But CV&G did also think that the characters were too small and the minigames were weak. Next up is ST Karate from 1986 by Eldersoft. Eldersoft released a karate game prefixed with the target machine for the ST, Amiga, and Sinclair QL. This ST version is another game that firmly takes its cues from International Karate. It's a fun game with interesting mini-games and in-game obstacles, but falls a little flat in the looks department with a limited amount of animation frames and slightly erratic gameplay. Even though it controls a little bit too fast, ST Karate is a fun little beat-em-up. It doesn't really add anything new to the genre per se, and I will not be including the Atari ST version of International Karate on this list, just the follow-up IK+, so ST Karate filled a void left by the colorful but poor playing ST version of International Karate. What did the magazine say? French ST magazine generally liked it, but gave it a mediocre score of 67%. How about the rest of the magazines? The Good. Page 6 magazine agreed, but gave it an overall excellent score, saying it was fast with remarkable animation, magnificent graphics, and was very playable. The Mid. ST magazine liked the sampled sounds, but did not get to hear the MIDI music, while Page 6 said that the difficulty starts off a little too stiff. The Bad. They both found the control to be difficult, which is pretty much the death knell to me in a game like this, but it seems Page 6 got used to it pretty quickly and had a blast playing the game with true MIDI sound. Barbarian, the Ultimate Warrior, also known as Death Sword, 1987, Palace. This is the first game I can remember where you got to chop the head off an opponent. The ST was the lead 16-bit platform for this 1987 masterpiece that was also ported to 12 other mostly microcomputer platforms. The evil magician Drax is terrorizing the Jeweled City and has cast a spell over the beautiful princess Marina, who is forced to obey him. As the hero, Gorth, you are sent to help the city and free the princess. Your task is to beat 8 of Drax's best warriors, and at last, the magician himself. Barbarian is another game that I had early on before I got a taste of all that European software houses had to offer. I always liked it, but was never any good at it. This was, and probably still is, the swordsman's answer to International Karate in every way possible. It's fast and furious, and again, for me at least, quite difficult. What do the magazines have to say? The Good. In their 90% review, CV&G said the gameplay, graphics, animation, sounds, and control are all superb. The Mid. Your Computer magazine gave it 83%, with their only complaint being that the animation needed a few more frames, and the sprites were basically recolored, smoothed over versions of the high-res 8-bit graphics. The Bad. Weirdly, Ace Magazine said the opposite of CV&G in a 64% review, complaining that the sprites and animation were a jerky mess. I'll leave it up to you guys to tell me which it is. The fourth game on our list is International Karate Plus, or IK+, 1988 by System 3. The original International Karate, also known as World Karate Championship, was one of the very best games for the Atari 8-bit, but the ST version was marred by slow response and colorful but oddly updated graphics that didn't really hold a candle to the original, so it was left off this list. The follow-up, though, is a masterpiece. Oddly called Chop and Drop in the USA, this version has you fighting two other players, either a human and computer or two computer opponents at the same time. There are some fun sub-games between matches and a nice set of varying backgrounds, but at its heart, it's just an amazingly playable arcade fighting romp. International Karate Plus is the first game on this list that actually adds to the International Karate and Karate Champ formula in a significant way, and has to be considered one of the overall best action arcade games, not just for the ST, but for all microcomputers. It has everything an 80s fighting game player could want in a single or two-player game. So what did the reviewers think? The good. In its 100% review, really a 5 out of 5 budget re-release review, The One magazine said, even in March 1991, that it was still regarded as one of the best of its kind on the ST and other microcomputer platforms. The Mid, ST Action, in another budget re-release review, gave it 86%, but said it was dated now. Obviously, they were comparing it to consoles, as the ST was yet to get a really good fighting game better than this. Many times reading ST Action magazine, you could get the sense that they were just some of the junior reviewers hoping to get to the Amiga or Mega Drive magazines someday. The bad. Not really bad at all, but German Power Play gave it only 77%, saying it was the best of the ST, but this was a 1987 review when there wasn't much other competition. The fifth game on our list is Seconds Out from 1988 by Tynesoft. Punch-Out on the Atari ST? I fondly remember trying to find this game at local retail because on a vacation in 1987 I'd played the arcade game Punch-Out non-stop and hoped this would be as good. Seconds Out lets you fight 5 boxers on your way to becoming world champion. You see your own boxer in front of you, transparent, so you can see your opponent who you have to beat. Apart from the initial opponent, each one has a special move. You use the joystick button and stick position to hit with your left and right hand, unleashing head and body blows. While I find this one to be a good button masher, it only got poor reviews. But it stands as a nice display of ingenuity for Tynesoft, as it was the only first-person boxing game I can recall on the ST. The biggest problem, though, is the best graphics are the front-facing ones of the fighters you are battling, but those are mostly obscured by your own fighter's big head. Seconds Out is definitely a different beast than International Karate. It might not add anything gameplay-wise to the genre, but the third person behind the back view is definitely new for an ST or other 16-bit computer game. The good. In its 582 Mystery Point review, Ace said that it was good fun. I agree. The mid. In its 54% review, ST Action said it's basically a brainless slugfest with no real strategy. I agree. The bad. Atari ST Action also called it a joystick breaker. I definitely agree with this. All of this is true, but it's still one of my favorite mindless games for the platform. The sixth game on our list is Panza Kickboxing from 1990. Endorsed by Andre Panza, this computer game adaptation of Thai kickboxing features over 35 moves. Use the training gym to build up your character's abilities until you feel ready to take on an opponent. You also have the ability to customize your attacks. When you're ready, go to the ring to take on various opponents as you try to become the best kickboxer in the game. Panza looks, sounds, and controls better than 95% of all other Atari ST games. So why did I find it boring? It's a lot of the same over and over. It's quite fun for a bit and probably has the best animation on this list. It just needed a little extra to push it over the top. It does add to the international karate formula with the training and number of moves available, but when it comes down to brass tacks, it's still just a simple, fun button masher with a nice coat of paint. Great for an hour or two of play. The good. In an 84% review, Zero Magazine said that both the animation and the range of moves were outstanding. The mid. In the same review, Zero complained that while the game does contain some league matches to play in, the actual progression through the opponents is missing, but it's only a small problem. The bad. In a 71% review, ST Action also praised the graphics and animation, but called it repetitive and a little boring after a while. The seventh game on our list is called No Exit, a 1990 release by Cork Television. No Exit is a side-view martial arts beat-em-up, similar in style to International Karate. Each fight must be won within a time limit. You can specify your character's abilities quite precisely, trading off vivacity with efficiency, resistance, and strength. Your character has a special destructive mode, which can be accessed 3 times. This turns the character into a monster corresponding to the opponent you're fighting against, and increases the level of damage you can inflict. No Exit has a few things going for it. It has sounds and animation on par with Panza, but the colors of at least the first 2 fighters are a little bland, and they're smaller than I would have wished. The control is good, but my character kind of did a few things on its own that had me checking to see if I was actually in control more than one time. It adds to the International Karate formula with the character attribute settings and the special moves. It also has enemy fighter progression. All of this should have placed it well above other games in this genre. So what went wrong? It was very difficult to find reviews, but Moby Games did have a 37% review by German ASM magazine. There were no Atari Mania comments, and even my trusty friends at both Atari Legend and Atari Crypt have not given this one a deep look yet. I had to use Google Translate to read the review from German ASM magazine, and the first paragraph is hilarious, so I'm just going to read it and the conclusion verbatim. Completely hopeless. The first paragraph. From the butt and breast specialist Tomahawk, an offshoot of the well-known Cork Television, who made Emmanuel, we are once again presented with naked facts in No Exit, but this time it's the male sex that is targeted at the breasts. The last paragraph. I really don't want to rate this game in a biased way or out of a bad mood, but if you compare this product with the fine works like International Karate, No Exit falls hopelessly behind. The only thing I really enjoyed was the German instructions translated from French. Keys on the keyboard are rotated instead of pressed, and the PC stick is swung diligently. Anyway, that was a German review making fun of the French instructions while I read the German review translated with Google Translate into English. So there you have it. We're down to the last 3 games on our list. Number 8 is Pit Fighter 1991 Domark. We're finally getting to games that are either ports or clones of late 80s and early 90s arcade fighters. These games obviously tried to improve on the Karate Champ formula in a big way, but when they hit the ST, did they actually add anything better than was found in the earlier IK Plus port that we looked at? Pit Fighter is a midway arcade fighting game that features digitized graphics of real fighters and zooming effects. Players select from one of 3 fighters, Buzz, Tai, or Kato, to take on anyone who dares. At the conclusion of a match, players are individually awarded a knockout bonus, brutality bonus, and fight purse. Every third match is a grudge match where players test skills of one another. The last man standing is the winner of this 3 knockdown match. Players fight their way to the elimination match to decide who wins the opportunity to dethrone the champion, the Masked Warrior. Oh boy, I can't really judge this one and the next one on the list by how close they are to the arcade games, given that neither even made an attempt to use the extended STE hardware. So I'll judge these on the gameplay themselves, not the conversion. While Pit Fighter on the ST is kind of fun, the sheer amount they try to replicate from the arcade turned it into a slow mess of a joystick button mash fest. The single-digit frame rate doesn't do it any favors. The good. In an 89% review, ST user first took issue with the graphics glitches, but then came around and said that in spite of them, the game was refreshingly simple to play and really fun for 2 people side by side. The mid. In a 65% review, ST Format said that once the novelty of the digitized graphics wears off, you're left with an average beat-em-up, though they also praised the 2-player mode. The bad. In a 50% review, GamesX magazine called it as slow and jerky as the Amiga, with worse sound. The big question will be if ports like this should have even been attempted on a 512K STFM lowest common denominator machine. Maybe, and maybe not. But by the time we get to the final game on this list, you'll see what could have been accomplished with the upgraded STE hardware. The next game on our list, number 9, is Street Fighter II, a 1992 US Gold arcade port. Street Fighter II is the granddaddy of modern fighting games, but here is a description for all of those who have never partaken. Street Fighter II is a one-on-one fighting game. Players select from one of 8 characters: Ryu, Ken, Blanka, E. Honda, Zangief, Chun-Li, Guile, and someone I cannot pronounce, Dalism, but I haven't played this game much before, to do battle with. They must then use their combat strengths to defeat the other 7 fighters, followed by 4 boss characters: M. Bison, Vega, Sagat, and Balrog, and excuse me for not pronouncing those correctly. Each character represents a certain country and has his or her own reasons for wanting to win against the others. A lot of people might consider this to be a terrible version of the arcade game, from the 16-color graphics to the single-button control. This is definitely not the version to play if you have a 16-bit console around, but as a piece of ST history, it's possibly the best modern fighter to this point in its catalog. Yes, it's a little subpar to IK Plus in my opinion, and obviously it's one of the weakest ports mainly because it could have used the STE capabilities and as well added JAGPAD support to make a very nice version for players with an STE and above. Ocean opted not to do this, unfortunately. That being said, given the limitations, this is about as good as probably could have been accomplished. Possibly more colors could have been achieved with some timer B switches, but really, considering what I expected from Ocean this late in the ST library, I was actually impressed with what they accomplished on a machine that was designed in 1984 to do general purpose computing. What did the magazine say? The good. ST Format gave it 91%. And this score is mainly relative to other ST fighting game efforts up to 1992. They praised its huge sprites, graphics, and choice of moves. Even though the special moves were different than the arcade game combos, they were intact and fun to pull off. The mid. In an 84% review, ST Action admitted that this is a game that probably never should have been attempted on a standard ST, but it's surprisingly good, especially for an Ocean release. The bad. In a 68% review, ST users said that the hype around the ST release will disappoint ST fans because the game could not live up to it and really needed to use 1 megabyte or STE capabilities. We've made it to the final game, number 10, Ultimate Arena, 1994 for the STE. In 1994, Steam released a fighter that was worthy of the STE capabilities. Originally released as a public domain demo to gauge interest, Ultimate Arena arrived with a splash on the STE in late 1995. It was everything an STE owner could want in a fighting game for their aging home micro, and showed that the STE capability was very much underutilized when the machine was fighting with the A500 for supremacy in the sub 300 pound gaming PC fight. The aim of the game is to take your male or female counterpart through a series of fights in hope of gaining entry into the elite fighting club. There are special moves in multiple locations, digitized graphics and sounds, as well as nice animations and easy joystick controls. Fight. Ultimate Arena really is a very well-crafted game that shows what could have been for ST owners if the industry had decided to support their machine. The STE capabilities were on par with the Amiga 500 in most respects, except there's no second 16-color background screen, hence the limited on-screen colors. In any case, I had a blast playing this, and recommend it highly to anyone wanting to see a unique fighter that is really only available on the STE and Falcon. So, there were still magazines around when this game was released. Let's take a look at what they said. The good. ST Format loved everything about it. The fast graphics, the gameplay, the sounds, and the animation. The only thing they didn't really like is the mid. The game came on multiple discs and had a lot of disc swapping, but it could be installed on a hard drive. The bad. In a 70% review, Atari World magazine had sobering news. They called it competent but not outstanding because they didn't like the single button play mechanic. In any case, Ultimate Arena is very much a showpiece for what the STE could accomplish.
Sandy wins.
So, that's all 10 games for this time. What did we learn here? Well, for me personally, I still think in the classic era of the ST, 1986 to 1993, there was no better fighter produced than IK+. But I have to admit that the team behind Ultimate Arena really did a great job in 1995 of finally producing a game worthy of the 16-bit moniker for the ST family of machines. What are your thoughts? Next time, we'll be retaking a look at vertical flying shoot-'em-ups and tracking their progression on the platform in 10 games. Until then, have fun playing your favorite one-on-one beat-em-ups in the vertical blank.
We were children of the Silicon Revolution, an X generation conscripted to fight the console and home computer wars. A product of an analog 70s childhood, we came of digital age in the 80s, believing we could affect the world 8 bits at a time. Armed with joysticks, full-stroke keyboards, Jolt Cola, and MTV haircuts, we proceeded into the vertical blank. There, we stayed up late at night, devising incantations from D&D rulebooks and beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code. Video games were the match, and programming was the fuse, as the infinite possibilities of the digital world exploded into the internet age to come. We are Generation Atari.
Into the vertical blank.